Hello, good evening, and welcome to another Webster report on this Sunday, the 13th of April 2025. And what been happening this week, Alex? There's a big furore going on. I don't know if you've heard it. Something about somebody making promises about an inquiry and looking into grooming and rape gangs, and then going back on those promises. And the five inquiries that they said would happen, they're now being watered down. This is causing a lot of friction, but I'm still seeing that there's a lot of people that are still surprised that that Keir Starmer would say what he's going to do and then go back on it. But we'd fall back onto this parliamentary privilege thing, don't we? Where they can tell lies legally as long as whatever's in the manifesto is what is they're going to do. Anything else is just, it's just dressing, isn't it?
Well, there used to be a time when accountability meant something. Like there could be consequences for not giving accountability, but I think ever since the era of COVID, what we discovered there was, if you want to, run the steamroller through town, when they first suspended Parliament, if you remember, they tried to claim that it was like an emergency, that some things are more important than, we call them democratic processes, they still weren't, but at least the appearance, the optics of it being a democratic process were actual discussion by the elected representatives of constituents were able to converse, discuss, question. And even though it was a bit of a charade, at least it was there, and that got undermined. And ever since then, they've realised that the optics are king. So we can just, because what they've realised, I think, is there's no way that your average person sat at home now, like people say watching this, they can comment in the chat, and we can incorporate those ideas. We can talk about them, or we could shut them down. We could just be a couple of right prawns and just go, oh, look at these people in the chat. Yeah, we're not interested in that. And totally disconnect. And nothing they could do would make it, they'd probably just stop watching, obviously. And if we started disrespecting them, mocking them, then I think it'd be even faster that we'd lose their interest and they wouldn't be watching us. But for some strange reason, what happens in political circles now is like me and you, we just completely fringe. Politicians make these massive decisions like people could get conscripted. So this is why they're still invested, because they go, well, I don't want to turn me back and then find out tomorrow that I'm going to the front line in Ukraine. This is the only reason I think why people remain invested, because even though they know it's a waste of time and it doesn't make much difference, there could be severe repercussions and consequences based on the decisions that these clowns make. Whereas anything that me and you do, you just go, oh, I can't be bothered with this, just turn over or stop watching. But if Keir Starmer makes a decision in terms of civil liberties, for example, and imprisons somebody for making a tweet or expressing an opinion, and it gets reported to the police, they could get banged up. So I think we're spectators and voyeurs of political processes, so-called political processes, but only because, not because we think we can change anything, but because we're quite concerned to know what's going on some level. But it's almost like an admission that we can't do anything about it, because you can't rebel. You can't do anything now that seems to be a particular way. So they just have carte blanche to do whatever they want. So it's that absurd that something that's of a massive public interest, like a public inquiry about public institutions and how they've turned a blind eye, just like they did with Savile, but at a different level altogether now, systemically. Oh, well, we don't want to look at that. Or there could be some problems with reform in the local elections, so we'll just invent some nonsense about new parliamentary boundaries for regions and justify just cancelling elections, which at any other time, if any other country did it, they'd be classed as a dictatorship. But when we do it now, it's just what's happening. And that's just how it is. So I think there's been a massive degradation of accountability. It wasn't great before, but we weren't a banana republic. But now we're quickly becoming one of those.
Well, the thing is, people, at least in this country at the minute, still don't see this as a dictatorship. I think it's a county in Essex. The Labour Council there are trying to pass legislation to ban Christian street preaching. It's illegal to try and convert people on the street preaching the gospel, but the Muslims can still preach Islam on the street. They're doing this this division thing really harshly now, and it's like, it's said all over social media that all this division is causing not just division but friction as well. And then on top of that, you not go. I mean, if these rape gangs, these grooming gangs, were all linked with white English people, you'd want a public inquiry. But it's there's two issues here. Is it because of the the high numbers that Pakistani rape gangs, grooming gangs, whatever you want to call them, they've all got that hooked to it, and Labour are looking to keep hold of their votes. So you've got this really big mix of things that are coming in, and people want to talk about it, but they've all been trained that they can't mention that because it's racist. They can't mention that because it's going against the government. And it's causing this great big clash all over the place. And it's all in these small pockets. But at the end of the day, surely it's about keeping children safe, no matter what colour, what religion, it doesn't matter. But you know that there's an agenda behind it. And then the other thing that we've got to take in is, who are they covering up for? Who will come out? What names will come out if we do have an inquiry? And for me, Alex, it's like the protest and rejection thing. If you want an inquiry, you're just going to go and look for information, but that's not an investigation. We know that this is corrupt. There's a woman, an article I published, going off into all this system now. There's an article from Scotland where a woman was forced to have a smart meter, and where it was fitted damaged the kitchen, and it's costing us 700 quid to fix the kitchen. Now, that meter was forced on her, which shouldn't have been forced on her. They're using commercial legislation and forcing it onto private homes that we think is private, but because of the way we've acted, we've plugged straight into this system, and we're just like a nonchalant loop in it. They just don't care. It's all commerce. And if that is all regarded as that with commerce, that's got to be stopped. These are meant to be your machines. You turn the machine of commerce on when you want it, Alex. But this is just presumed it's running 24/7 now, because that's what we've been taught to. And to try and tell people that they've been taught that's difficult. That's really difficult. You've got to have people who find that something gets to them. Something breaks, just chips a tooth off that cog that's been programmed, and all of a sudden it starts to rewire. But once you start to learn, you can't go back. It's then, well, what do we do? There's loads of people now starting to understand all this stuff, particularly stuff of this world, I should say, all in little pockets, all getting their own parts of expertise and actions that they're doing, but they don't actually physically know where to go. Organise and stuff like that. We've never known how to organise because people said that it's this way or it's only this way. We know that there's only one way, but in this world, it's multitude. We know there's a massive amount of fraud that's gone on from birth. We've been abused and groomed since birth. Our parents were the same. Our grandparents were the same. Somebody was talking to me yesterday. Well, surely everybody would be able to work this stuff out. No, we have some common factors. Work hard, pay your bills. Everybody knows that. Banks lend money. Everybody knows that. That's what we're all taught. When you find that is absolutely opposite, you try and tell people until they get into a position where they're forced to go and have a look. It's only then. And they're doing it, Taylor talks about it a lot, about turning the heat up on that frog in the boiling pot. That's what they're doing now, but they've ramped the flame right up. The bubbles are going everywhere. the lawlessness is everywhere, Alex.
Yeah.
It's how much hotter do we have to get?
Well, I don't think it's going to make any difference because I think what's happened is we've entered into what Jean Baudrillard, who's dead now, French social theorist and critic, he talks about hyperreality, which I've talked about in the past. And it's a bit like a Star Trek holodeck. And it's like reality has been moved onto this holodeck. So everything's being played out on a holodeck now. And people are responding to it's like someone's waving at the window to get your attention, but they're not really there.
It's Plato's cave, isn't it?
It's a simulation now, and it doesn't matter how it appears to be real. Like you knock on your table and you go, "Oh, that's real." The thing is, what is real is being defined for us. So it's all a movie. And the problem is, we're just not able, because everyone's absolutely overloaded, too much information. Nobody knows how to scale it down to get back into reality again. The only way to really do it is what was suggested by the pedagogue, John Taylor Gatto, which is to get back into locality, get back into your body. We need to stop high-speed travel in the same, like everything's like HS2 and all this other stuff. And the whole point then is not to be in the present. It's not to be alive now. It's to get to somewhere else as fast as possible. Well, if you're always in transition, you're not present. You're not a being, really. You're a doing. You're an acting. And I don't want to sound like Deepak Chopra here because I'm not, but there is a point about this where beingness needs a certain amount of stability, rest, like a pause for breath. And when things are moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, it's like our brains used to be well suited to being like cameras, taking a snapshot, a photograph of a scene, and then you could analyze that for a while and look at its constituents and think about it, reflect on it. Now your brain is supposed to be operating like a video camera. The data is moving so fast into shot, and as soon as it's in shot, it's leaving shot. So our brains do not have the capacity to keep up with the speed of everything as it's happening. And technology is adding to that. There's a range of factors involved in this, but we're still trying to operate on all parameters. This is why a lot of the new age you start talking about this evolution of consciousness, talking about us being in density, moving up into these crystalline bodies and crystalline structures, because even though it's a strange metaphysic, it reflects the fact that things are changing at such a pace, it's ridiculous. And people don't know anymore how to keep tabs on anything. This is why the corporates are just a law unto themselves, because nobody has the bandwidth to shut down to deal with all the things that are cropping up, because as soon as something's cropped up, something else is cropping up, and then something else is cropping up. So your attention is so scattered, so divided, that there isn't time. You'd be living in a constant slow motion. You'd only have time in a day to deal with 2 or 3 things. You need to deal with 2,000 or 3,000 things in a day now. So this is why their brains are frazzled, because they go, "Oh yeah, paedophile inquiry, seen it, heard it. Yeah, it'd be ideal if they did something about it." But then it's almost like an invitation for everyone to get obsessed with just that one thing, but they can't. So they can't give attention to it, even though it's very serious, because there's all these other things snapping at their ankles like a Yorkshire Terrier.
Well, it's the look in the eyes, not around the eyes, look in the eyes. It's the distraction. It's what's going on over there. Just because one thing's come from your left-hand side and to your right-hand side, it's gone out your vision, it doesn't mean it's gone. It might go into the Schrodinger's cat category, but it's there and it isn't. But until you see it. But we are being distracted by all this stuff. But we've got enough people now. Certainly from 10, 15 years ago when I got into this game, we've got so many people who have got so much knowledge and are going actively doing things. We would have all these people bang to right, Alex, if the judiciary and the politicians and therefore the police institutions weren't all corrupted at some level. And that's not every man and woman. I've got mates in the police, they're good people. You know, we always know that it's the management that needs to be corrupted. Everybody else just has to fall in line. And they're getting people now in just follow orders. There was a fella and his wife arrested for emailing in a school WhatsApp group, pouring into the school WhatsApp group, asking questions. They were arrested for harassment, for worrying about this. You've got preachers who are going to be arrested. Mo asked what's so, upsetting about preaching the gospel. Well, there's something about the gospel, isn't there? It's only the gospel that's being stopped from doing this. You could stand on the street and talk about the Force and the Jedis versus the dark side all day long. What does it need for people to see this? Because I understand people see all this, Alex, but they're not doing anything because nobody knows what to do. It's only when you get put into the position that there's no other options but to do something. And we bring it up, well, at least I do, every week about the Martin Niemöller syndrome. You get to a point where there's nobody left, but there is enough people now, Alex, if we could just get get a grip of what the courts are doing en masse. But I can't, it's leaving it up to people again, isn't it? It's out of our hands. All we can do is put the information out there. I know there's a lot more people not calling me as many names anymore because it's happening to them. It's the same with the COVID stuff. 5 years ago, Alex, everybody was reporting people and everything. We've got so many heightened things going wrong with medical issues now, and they're trying to normalise it. If it's got to be normalised, it's not normal, is it?
No, it sure isn't. Yeah, well, I don't think there's going to be a solution anytime soon. I mean, whether there'll be a civil war or not, it's hard to say, because is that what they want? Possibly.
It'd be beneficial for them, wouldn't it? Because it takes the heat off them.
Yeah, but again, we haven't got any voices, have we? We haven't got any voices that have got any power. So they're just going to do what they want. I can't see anything other than they're just going to roll out what they're going to roll out, and we just have to wait with bated breath. And eventually they'll cross a certain line, but they're going to keep pushing it. They're going to keep pushing it. So you have to decide what attitude you're going to take to that. Are you just going to wait, or are you going to become active? And if you're going to become active, in what way are you going to become active? Everyone's got to make their own choice. That's for sure.
Well, they're taking money off people. Next year, the benefits system's going to be rejigged. People who've been on PIP for years are going to be taken off it. What are they going to do with people like that? There's got to be. How do we stop this? How do we fix this? Because we're told there's no money, Alex, but yet 2 days ago, 450 million has just popped up to be given onto Ukraine. That's on the billions that we've already promised them. But we can't look into what's happening to our children in all these major cities. We've got kids being trafficked everywhere. People are taking up. One fella who was giving an interview, and he said that when his daughter had been trafficked, he had CCTV footage of men picking her up and taking her places, and she's disappeared for 2 weeks. One fella got arrested to trying to break into a fella's house to save his daughter, and they arrested the fella and left the daughter with the groomer because they didn't see anything wrong. How does that? That doesn't even compute how that happens. And evidence from family. So if you've got evidence that something's happening to a family member and you turn it over to the police are saying they can't take that as evidence, even if it's CCTV. Are these just in these kind of cases? Because I know we've got local case going on, and it's going to blow up in the faces. It's already blowing up in the media now, and that's to do with gangs that are going on, and the police are doing nothing, but they're looking like they're doing something. But the people who are turning up, their hands are tied. They don't know. They're being told that a certain thing, they've got to go and do it, and they are just following orders. And it's if those people keep doing that, we get to the scenario back before World War II. People will give up rights and freedoms when things go really wrong. There's another stabbing in Accrington town centre. Lads, 20-year-old stabbed multiple times. It's happening. It's happening not just every day. It's happening multiple times a day now, Alex. We can certainly see the lawlessness coming in, can't we?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is, are people going to start using the word evil? And when you say that, is it just bad things that have happened? Or is it some sense of a being or beings doing it? People talk about the deep state all the time as a hidden hand. It's kind of nefarious forces, but they're always perceived to be powerful human beings in suits who meet in clandestine arrangements. But, if people don't see a correlation to evil, if they can't see an energetic movement, then I don't know what it would take for people to see that there's more going on than meets the eye that transcends just human agency. It's to me, it's obvious, like we started with COVID, that there was this unleashing, and it's just getting exponentially worse. And this is a problem. It's not slowing down; it's gathering pace. So we don't really know how fast it's going to get to a critical point, but it clearly is. People are fed up, but it doesn't change the fact that no matter how fed up they are, they're not doing anything. So, and it's understandable why they're not doing anything. And it's just because they're a bit of a circus.
Yeah, they kept distracted as well, and people are still working. They're working the guts out to get that holiday, to get that time away. I've got family and friends who are looking forward to counting down 109 days. That's us. That type of stuff. They're still doing that whilst they still can. They're still shopping and stuff like that whilst they still can, because nothing's changed for them. But if it's that much of a shock coming in, Alex, it's a struggle because panic, when it subsides and panic comes back down. Well, the panic for a start will make it people easier to control, unless people are organised with things. We've got information and stuff at the minute. If we can organise around that to keep the networks going, keep the challenges going, we slow it down. They can't. But I see them making major leaps here, and it's like. It's like musical statues. You moved, no, I didn't. No, you did. I didn't move. We can clearly see them moving, but people are that distracted. It's very hard to. I've always said it's very hard to explain to people how much we've been fooled with everything, and we've been programmed that this is life. When you get to this age, you do that, you do this, you do. And it's said in the chat room, I think it was more credit, that we don't know who we are. It was only when this revelation came to me with all this that I realised not only do we not know who we are, we've been programmed to be something that we're not, but we are. We can be. Well, hang on a minute, that leaves a lot of grey area, a lot of ambiguity, a lot of places to mess around in. Just like the English language, we have 8 words to describe one thing. Were, there. You can mess about with this forever. Patent it, get it into the civil justice system. Let's treat everybody as a piece of paper. And they can't talk to us because we can't hear them. If it's not on paper and it doesn't tell us exactly, we can just ignore it. The problem that we had was 10, 15 years ago, we'd started to go into court with that paperwork, not standing there saying, I'm a man, I have no contract. We were putting it in front of them, and they had to blatantly commit fraud then. Calling armed police on me, turning case law over and not applying it. If these were just courts, Alex, we would have turned this country around years ago.
Yeah, yeah. I think the change. I mean, I suppose I wouldn't want to get too philosophical, but you can't avoid it. So personally, I think what we're discovering now, I think we used to have. Bruce Lipton talked about epigenetics, the relationship, the dynamic relationship between our perception and our genes. And we used to think genes were fairly fixed, but we are in a much more dynamic, fluid relationship to our environment than we originally thought. This is demonstrated within biology. So if we don't wake up to that, we'll fail to recognise that being is constituted in action. So if you become too passive, your being begins to die. And so the point is, in a sense, you do create your own reality. And there is a reality outside of our perception. But if we totally conform to the how can I put it, the optics, the show that's being put on for us, and if that's hyper reality again, we're being sucked into an agenda that's been set by the show, and then we become reactive to the show. The show, it says, "Hey, look over there, do this, oh jump," and it's framing the script for people. And even if it says, "Don't jump," if you jump, you're still responding, even though you're inverting it. This is why protests merely invert the energy but keep it alive. So this is the difficulty that we've got now, because people have become, their being is separated, severed from action. So you've got to create your own reality based on your own values, and communities do that and come together and share their values to build together. And that applies to churches as well. Churches are no different. It could be a non-spiritual community, or it could be a church. But if individuals do not come together in groups and create realities, shared realities, they'll live according to the scripts that other people have written for them. So the only question is, are people living according to a script written for them by somebody else, or are they writing their own scripts? Even in like various psychodynamic theories, the idea was that, our parents are a large part of their formation, and then people can act out their parental dramas over and over again if they like. Keep repeating the script, keep reinventing the wheel, keep having relationships that reflect those patterns from, when they were being socialized. Act the script out, act the script out, act the script out. Don't change the script. So I think there's a therapeutic imperative for people, and they've got to wake up and realize, do you want to do things differently, or do you want to do things the way you always have? And because most people opt to do things the way they always have, nothing really changes, and it plays into the hands of these system lords who know what everyone else is doing. They're just running scripts. They're not a threat to the system. People who are genuinely creative and genuinely living their life, let's just say in spiritual terms, by the Spirit, if you're a Christian, Jesus describes himself when he talks to the woman by the well. Do you want to have water that you can drink that will never run out, never run dry? You won't have to come to this well again, because physical water you'll have to replenish. And he talks about rivers of living water flowing from the very colon, and the Greek is ektes koilas, out of the colon, out of the center of his being, living water shall flow. If we don't have that dynamic reality living within us and working itself out and living in line with it, then, it's going to become sterile. We're going to just keep repeating familiar scripts, acting out these dramas, getting on our hamster wheel, working the 9 to 5. Because so many of us have done it for so long, we don't have rivers of living water. It's dried up. So to me, if we had more people who were living as if their actions mattered, building together what they think is important, then we might stand a chance. But people are just spectators. That's the problem.
Well, it's when you said about the thinking bit. If from childhood, if we're taught how taught what to think rather than how to think, you can then control people just by asking questions. Because if you give them multiple choice questions, not only do they have that feeling of freedom, but they're choosing, not you. But you've already virtually groomed them into accepting what is. Now, that is the beginning of society. 40 years ago, they were trying to lower the sexual age of consent to 10 under pi. We have politicians who are still active now, active in that membership. So this is a design to take us all the way back to Babylon and further, where people were basically sacrificing children. We've been groomed into thinking that maybe not so much over here, but it is here. But the Americans have, abortion clinics on corners like we have shops. This is like almost ritualistic. Is this the new version of, sacrificing to Baal? Is it just in this new format, Alex? Has anything changed? Because you said we're going to keep playing this over and over again. So if we only invest in this world and there is no way out of this world, no matter what, then this is all we're going to do until the end. It's a good job we had a loving God that came into this world and said, "Hey, I'm the only way, this way, get out. It's the only way." And that's wrong. That's wrong. That's a lie. All these religions say it's a lie. It's just too coincidental in a system. And how, all I can say is that my mum was the one who was the rule follower, but the rule bender, but my dad was, if it's a bad rule, you get it broken. You break it. You don't just follow rules for the sake of it. You ask why. And if you stand up for yourself, that type of thing. I was fortunate. I was blessed to have those parents because I certainly fell into this. If we were talking brain chips and holodecks and internet pornography when I was 12 years old, mate, I'd have been lost. I wouldn't be sat here having that conversation with you. But you can see it with our children now. I used to hear those people say, though, "Oh, pornography, it rewires your brain, it does this and that." It's only when you come out of it and you look back and you think, bloody hell, you can see what it had done to you. You can see how people who have grown up in abused backgrounds and then latch onto things like that, you can see how it intrigues them. You can see from psychology how it drags you down that dark path, doesn't it, Alex?
Yeah, well, I think Jesus said in John 10:10, "I've come that they might have life and have it more abundantly." And, that's interesting. So for me, there is a choice. You can go down that path and ask what that means, because I think that's still possible in a world such as this, Paul. Because I don't think we're defined by the rules of the game of the God of this world, who is, Satan.
Well, we know who's been given all authority since the cross, though. So I think that's what the big change is. I think that's why truth is now becoming abound. When we were talking off just before the show about Enoch, how prominent that is becoming now, because that is colouring in all the Genesis stuff. You start to look at extra biblical stuff like Jasher and Jubilees. You see how this stuff comes together. I was just that article that I posted to you earlier about, I might get the name wrong, the Sushus. This was like pre-Israel, and they followed Yahweh. Mm. So we've got all this history that we don't know. If it hadn't been documented in Egyptian history, we wouldn't even know about these tribes, some of these tribes. I mean, it's only till quite recently, last 150 years or so, the Amalekites, the Hittites, they were just a mythical, they never existed. And then we find the bloody city. We find everything related in documents and stuff. All this truth is now coming forward. So it's he's not in control of this world, but when that restraint is removed, he's going to come back as if he was before the cross. And we haven't seen a world like that, Alex. And a lot of people, they're still arguing about Mickey O'Rourke in Big Brother at the minute. There's going to be a lot of bigger issues, I think, coming, pal.
Yeah. Yeah, well, will he wake up? Who knows, mate? Reality TV. That's what you're dealing with. That's hyper reality. People staring at celebrities and being fascinated by people who have no merit whatsoever. I mean, why would you? Why would you be interested in a bunch of shallow opinions of a bunch of people you've never met and place that as having significance above the life that you could lead any time with any meaningful person you decide to have in your life? But it's all a strategy for treading water and saying, pass. I don't want to do that. Don't want to have authentic relationships. I'd rather sit here watching somebody else talk crap. So at the end of the day, it's an infection that's all the way through the system.
How they're doing it with societies, though, I mean, I think it's in China, they've got virtual wives. The husband comes home on his own single, and a robotic wife talks to him as if it's his wife. And you're thinking, this world's mad. It's gone bonkers. I just
you've got to admit a robotic wife might be a bit less of a challenge.
I'm not sure. If this is hooked up to AI and Wi-Fi, mate, as soon as it starts getting knowledge, it takes me back to that Eddie Murphy sketch where he says, "I'm not marrying an American woman because they take you and they want half your shit. I'm going to go to Africa, but the trouble is, I'll have to keep all my American friends away from her because they'll convince her, and then she'll come eventually and learn that half his shit I can take." They'll learn, mate. They'll learn. It was making me laugh with, I think she was an ex-footballer called Karen Carney, and she believes that half of the money that comes out of the male Premier League should be given to the females. So half of what's generated should go to the females.
Perfect logic. And if you're a woman,
that's what I mean. It's not the first time that a woman's taken half a man's stuff.
But the women will probably go, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. That is. Well, you would, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yeah,
we're just incentivized having opinions that other people can back up because they become normative. Yeah, and then the courts enact it all, and they go, yeah, that's a good idea. And next thing you know, there's no accountability. The court you go to the family court and you're a bloke, you're screwed. So these are just the new rules of the game, and there's nothing you can do about it. So how much more punishment do you want to take? But of course, until there's massive consequences, like men just increasingly opt out of marriage, which they are doing more and more.
That's why it's happening, mate. That's why it's happening. The destruction of the nuclear family is what all these movements have always been about over the last 100 years.
Yeah. Well, they've been successful.
Go on.
Well, they've been successful, so ultimately it's going to be down to us and the way we live. There's a lot of ways now that you can just conform to the narrative. It's everywhere. The narrative's everywhere. And like I said, it's hyper real. So just get onto your holodeck and just join the fun. Just it's all entertainment. And until people decide that they want to tune out. I mean, I've been thinking about that again, even as we've been talking about what it says in Revelation 17, come out of her, my people. You can read that in so many ways, but even the news feeds, even the information that we're given, it's all a so-called reflection of what's real, but it's one level at least removed from what's real. So if we are engaging with reports of the real instead of engaging with our own real, then we are going to become a tapestry of stories, references to something outside of ourselves, which is supposed to be the case, may or may not be the case. But it's like a third party gossip. What's third party gossip got to do with your life? I mean, think about celebrity culture. Why would it have any bearing at all on anything you do ever? In fact, why would you allow it to? Why would you allow some data about which restaurant a celebrity couple went to and what menu they ate from? Why would you allow any of that? Even impinge into your consciousness. The point is so mundane. You're like inviting yourself. To me, we choose. We choose what we want to feel, and if we're dictated to by those impressions, they will begin to define our reality. So it's like where you look. Where do you want to look? And then what do you want to construct when you're looking in that direction? Most people are that busy being a passenger or a spectator. They're waiting for the next bus to turn up at the bus stop so they can go for a ride and then drop them somewhere else. Then they wait for the next bus. We just rendered passive. But we've got a lot more scope. It's the chimpification of human beings that we're seeing.
Yeah. They're all... we're certainly all being clipped and rounded up into things at the minute. I can only see that you can only push people so far, Alex, before there's a reaction. But we've got to react better. We've got to be able to think about this. But people are going to be angry. How they're still pushing the jabs now. This is like, there's massive amounts of information and real reports from experts that are saying that all these anomalies have happened. That, I've just published an article from Breitbart that in 7 states, Fauci is facing murder charges in 7 states. Yet Biden pardoned him, with his auto sign thing. People can see all this is going on, but Alex, what do we do? It's all we can do is we've talked to people. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now. I've lost. I don't know how many people I've spoken to and engaged with, and who've seen and heard shows from Raconteurs News to my stuff to other people's shows who talk about all this. It's not as if people don't know what's going wrong, and I think there's certainly a tipping point of people since they were locked up for basically a year. They've noticed something, because when everything got ramped up and they all tried to go back to the jobs, and who'd been furloughed, who'd been paid to stay at home, they now didn't have a job, or now they found themselves reapplying for the job because they'd done a rejig, because they'd lost money and da. So it was all about social engineering again. With the miners' strikes, they pitted people against people. My 2 local towns are renowned for the rivalry over the miners' strikes. It's there's nothing new here, pal. And conscripting people to go to a war. I'm not being funny, mate, but I had 2 uncles in World War II. They fought against Nazis, but we're going to go over and help the Azov Brigade in the Ukraine. And the thing is to provoke Russia. That's all the Ukraine war's about, is to provoke Russia. Putin said in 1999, I'm not interested about the Ukraine, just don't join NATO, because I won't have nuclear weapons on my doorstep, and I won't wait for you to put them there before I do something. Well, they just did it. Now, we're going to bring Taylor in now to talk about international relations and what Donald Trump's doing about that. But Putin is only moving his piece on the chessboard, on the grand chessboard. Is it all part of the same game, or are we all playing different chess games in different nations? Because we know there's a one underlying thing to all this. So, without further ado, mate, what have you got for us? He fathers Chad there, Alex.
Say again.
He fathered Chad then. I could only see that, his eyes
Yeah.
upwards.
Hey everyone, how's it going today?
It's going. It's going. So what have you got for us,
Uh,
mate?
oh man, it's I've been having a bit of issues with my Windows recently, and it's been getting annoying. It's been slowing down my laptop and all that, especially when I'm trying to join calls on social media. But
Steady on, Alex. Put the Ukraine war on hold. He's got trouble with his windows.
oh, Ukraine. Oh boy. So um let's see. What should I say? What should I start with?
I only asked you, did you have everything ready to go? And you said, yeah. And
Yeah,
now
I'm
we
just
sat
deciding
there
what to start
wasting
with.
our own time.
I'm just deciding I'm just deciding what I should start with. I think I'll go with this. So we had Miss Gretchen Whitmer and Mr. Bill Maher appearing in an interview with Donald Trump a couple days ago. Oh, it was a it was a fun little thing to look at because it showed white hat control once again. It was very interesting. We had, as we know, Gretchen Whitmer, one of the 5 governors of in the U.S. who was it forcefully locked people up in to nursing homes and had many people killed, many older people killed purposely. It was 5 governors in particular: Andrew Cuomo of New York, Tom Wolf of Pennsylvania, Phil Murphy of New Jersey, Gavin Newsom of California, and Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. Now, some of these people are clearly gone. You can just look at them and say, "Oh, this person doesn't look anything like he used to." So that's one thing. And then we have Bill Maher, Child Rapist, Mister Predator, Mister Kid Love Production.
Is that alleged? Alleged?
Oh no, this is not a legend. This is proven. He's even on the Epstein logs. Also, I'll give you some quotes from Mr. Maher. In fact, I'll even show them on screen real quick. If I can just present, share screen. There we go. There we go. Fuck. Get this off my screen. There we go. All right, you see it? It might be a little small.
I can't read that.
Okay, okay, that's fair enough. Okay.
Well, why don't you read it?
All right, I'll read it for you. All right, first quote by Mr. Maher. She is in jail because she's in love. That's how I view it. Maher said this about a Seattle school teacher convicted of having sex with a 12-year-old student getting pregnant by him. That was his response. Here's another one. The worst they said he, Michael Jackson, did was little grabby under the covers. If I could go back and trade that experience being beat up at age 12 for being gently masturbated by a pop star, I would do it in a New York second. These quotes. Oh boy. And one more. But with Deborah LaVey screwing her 14-year-old boy student, the crime is that we didn't get it on videotape. Was he being taken advantage of? I wish I had been taken advantage of like that. What a memory she gave him. End quote. Bill Maher. I'm sure you guys know who Bill Maher is.
Yeah, I know who Bill Maher is, mate.
Yeah. He's a moron.
Yeah, this guy's a title fiddler. He's one of those people.
But do you not see, Taylor, that his profile being on TV, I've seen him sat there in his armchair having a cigar, arguing with people, because he's an atheist as well, isn't it? But he's normalising it. It's normal. I mean, it's like saying if back in the day, the old days, it'd be if you're a 14-year-old boy and you end up with a woman that's older, your dad might think differently of you than it being a girl. You would certainly think differently of you. I knew at 14 that I always fancied older women, but nothing like that ever happened to me. But seeing and knowing people in 15 years of stuff that had happened to, prisoners, you can see what an event like that, how in fantasy it seems, oh, that sounds intriguing. But when it actually happens to these people and you hear the stories, it doesn't actually pan out like that. It changes people's lives. Maybe he's just one of those people who like that kind of thing. We have a lot of twisted people who go for that stuff. It can get quite sick. If you go into Epstein Island, you're not just going because you like the Sundex, are you?
Well, I mean, there's several reasons that people went to Epstein's Island. It's not just it's not just one or another. Some people were blackmailed. Some people didn't want to go along with it, but were blackmailed into it. Others were tricked, and others were just others are just degenerates, satanic little fucks who like to diddle children, like Hillary Clinton. So there's there's several kinds of people. Well, yeah, but back to my point, though, I was trying to say is that these two people have Gretchen Whitmer and Bill Maher. Their tune has very interestingly changed recently.
Explain who Gretchen Whitmer is.
Gretchen Whitmer is the governor of Michigan. As I already said, she's one of the five governors responsible for forcing people into nursing homes and inflating the death toll by blatantly murdering thousands and thousands of old people. And these are mass murderers on a grand scale. All right, let me show you a picture just so you can see. All right, do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Cuomo, brother of Chris Cuomo, who was one of the lead anchors of CNN for the longest time, of New York, Tom Wolfe, Pennsylvania, Phil Murphy, New Jersey, Gavin Newsom, California, and there's Gretchen Whitmer right here on the bottom right, Democrat of Michigan. They're all Democrats, by the way. Nearly 40% of all COVID-19 deaths in the United States were under the watch of these five. And that's not an accident. That's premeditated murder. And that is absolutely right. So these people...
Let me just interject there, Taylor. Have you ever heard of a reality TV show from the UK called Big Brother?
No.
They lock people up in a house, right? And the health minister that was in charge of the removing elderly people out of the hospitals and putting them in care homes and then not allowing visitors and putting them on midazolam, of which his family had shares in midazolam. We put him onto that show. And it was to try and change people's attitudes of him. I remember being sat with my family. We were having a meal. And as I arrived there, they had, it wasn't Big Brother, it was I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Have you ever seen that? Where they put them in the jungle, Taylor?
Nope, never seen it.
Like Survivor, I think it'd be over with you. But anyway, my family was watching it. And they saw me face when I walked in, says, it's only 10 minutes. Anyway, little lad looks up at the telly and he'd been watching it. And he just went, and it was Matt Hancock. And he looks up at the telly and he went, I like Matt. And I went, giving this death stare. And his mum's mouthing over his head at me, going, he's only 9. He's only 9. I'm like that. But that's and it's as if it didn't happen that. I know people who watched the nans die through patio doors, Taylor, because they wouldn't go and hug them, or they couldn't go and hug them. It was a sickening time to see so many people who I had respect for being acting like sycophants. It was awful. And then they put that on the telly, and people just forget about it. And then football's on and things like that. Society's just collapsed or collapsing. Is it collapsed or collapsing, Alex?
It's collapsed.
Like this conversation. Go on, Taylor, carry on.
All right. First, let me address that. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that conversation. And I'm not sure if I answered that because it's been a while. But the answer is yes, he did. In fact, he was the main dude who did. So there you go. Him and
yeah, well, have you seen the state of what Justin Bieber is now? Seen the state of him now? He's a broken man. He's absolutely broken. He's absolutely broken. I think anybody who went to those parties, I've never heard of a guy called, I think his name's Terrence Howard. Just one sec. Yeah, I think his name is Terrence Howard. He must have something to do with music industry or something.
Probably.
And Diddy kept wanting to meet up with him. And one of his staff said to him, he says, I think he wants to go to bed with you. And he says, I just cut all ties with him at that point. He says, but there's a sickness that is in Hollywood and going through that music industry. And it's like we can all see it now. I mean, Lady Gaga's latest satanic stuff, they're not even hiding it, but it's always been there, Taylor. It's always been that underlying thing. And we go back to the 60s when we have the music, late 50s and music were, and 60s where the music changed, and then drugs were brought in, and then influencers and manufactured bands to lead the rebellion, or all this kind of stuff. And we see now the end product, and we see them 30 years from 60 to 90, where George Bush Sr., Taylor, announced, we've got a real chance of this new world order on September the 11th, 1990. These people, the beer guy will tell you all those dates mean something to these people.
Well, a lot. Well, I mean, the Westerns, damn it. The Western side of it started, I would say, what was it? Frankfurt School out of Germany, in the 1920s. And when they came to the U.S., after Hitler kicked them out, and they went to Columbia University, and that's when they infiltrated the teachers union, and then it spread out to the schools, and so the teachings then went to the children of the World War II veterans, and then when those people grew up, they would go on to lead the universities and the teachers unions, and we all know where that ended up.
Well, we've seen all our institutions, Taylor. All our institutions have been taken over, and they're just grooming kids now. That's why there's this kickback, isn't there, in the States? Where I don't know. I can't remember what executive order he's issued that many, but he's issued an executive order about martial law over these protests about kicking back about the education system, and there's only two genders and all that, kicking back against that, and Trump is now threatening martial law. Have you heard anything about
that? Yeah, I have.
I was going to say, well, that's good. Are you going to tell us about it?
Oh yeah. Just give me a second. I need to check something.
He just walks off in the middle of a conversation, Alex.
Well, at least
I wouldn't care if I'd not spoken to him before we come over. I said, have you got everything ready? And he said, yeah. And he's got nothing
I checked to see if there was somebody. I was checking to see if there was somebody there.
Yeah, I was going to get onto that.
Is there anybody there?
Okay, but yeah. So I'll answer that question. So, as I've mentioned before, the left are being played up, and as as the big detractors against Trump, and are for, they're the ones burning down the Teslas. They're the ones who are doing all the big protests. They're the ones who are being quote unquote anti-Semitic, which is putting the left against themselves. As I mentioned before, that's what people like AOC are for. But we've been waiting for that. What's it called? The Insurrection Act to go public for a while now, and when that happens, I can't say, but it should hopefully be soon. But as for executive orders pushing back against the what's it called, the multi-gender thing.
Well, hang on. What about the martial law? Have you no issue with him issuing martial law for that?
No issue whatsoever, because
That's a dangerous position, That's a dangerous position.
Well, when you have a when you have a libtarded crooked world, sometimes you have to pull the Band-Aid off, and you have to do harsh treatment in order to fix it. When you have a person who's on life support.
Your mate Hitler said that, pal.
Yeah, Hitler was a good man. I don't see the problem. So,
Alex, do you want to field that one?
Well, it's hard, isn't it? Because you're not allowed to give an answer to that question on Mr. Adolf. I mean, the thing is, some questions are too taboo to be able to answer them, because you'll get trussed up like a turkey. I mean, history generally, as historiography, which is the recounting of the facts, is a stitch-up job anyway. It's always someone's take on it. We know that. There is no such thing as an objective history, just like there's no such thing as an objective event. Things are observed, recorded, and a slant is put on them. So what we know is a slant's been put on all of historiography, the recorded events. A slant's been put on Mr. Adolf Hitler, and we like our baddies. The bottom line is you don't get balanced. Have you noticed that? You don't get balanced assessments of political leaders and world figures of history. They're either these incredible, successful imperialists who imposed their will on the world as they expanded and took over other countries, or they're just rogues and tyrants. And it just depends on who's telling the story and who's doing what to who. And if the media is controlled, or whatever mode it is of propaganda, if it's controlled, then it's going to spew out the version of reality which suits the narrative. And I just don't think we can get past that. But of course, with some things, it's just impossible to say because you can't get out alive. So if you appear in any way to affirm Adolf Hitler, you become a reprobate. Whether you should or you shouldn't, it doesn't really matter.
The thing I'd take on that is that where you say, Taylor, that when there's an uproar like that and there's things going on and you want to calm things down, an executive order to pass martial law, that it's like, we'll just take this off you for a bit. But people who let things go for a bit normally don't get them back. So when Hitler did that in 1933, yeah, people got 3-bedroom, semi-detaches, family cars, package holidays, but they gave up stuff for that security.
What did they give up?
They gave up freedom. They had to walk,
freedom?
Being able to walk around freely at whatever times they want, go to places what they wanted, unless they were stopped and they'd be asked to show for identification.
That did not happen. The only people that were under
Taylor, I'm sorry, mate. That did happen. Stop. Have you got your papers? People had to produce papers where they were walking around, mate. Don't say that didn't happen. I know it happened. I've spoken to people whose families had to live through these societies. Spoken to people who lived under Ceausescu. This really happened, Taylor. So you've got to understand, Hitler went in with those good intentions. We're just going to do this for a bit. And then we look what happened. People were rounded up. Political people who were against Hitler were rounded up, all under this guise of damage to the state, damage to the motherland. You've got to be careful, Taylor. I understand where you're coming from, that, these people have been outlandish, trying to make let blokes play against girls in sports and saying that it's normal, and, teaching little Johnny it's okay to have anal sex and now it might hurt a little bit, but it might work out. You shouldn't be doing that. So I get you, but you've got to look at the other side of it, mate, because that is a dangerous play. When Hitler did it, that he took over society. He didn't do it by killing people on the streets and doing it. He made it a democracy. There was a bad situation and a hero arose. That's how they looked at it. If you was a German national. When you look at America, Biden dug the grave of America, and now there's this new golden era. I've heard all this stuff before in history, the golden age and all that. So you've got to be able to start analysing this stuff, Taylor. I know it's easy to get carried away on that wave, though, but those people gave up the freedoms that I feel I've got. I can virtually walk anywhere, even though it's getting tighter and tighter because of land issues and things. But back in the day, does not occur in the world. It was normal to walk around, for lads in the 70s, walk around with an air rifle, going shooting rats and things like that. You couldn't do that now. So it isn't as free. If you create a situation that is so bad and then a solution's given, all you've got to do is do this and you can have this. After you've had nothing, you'll accept it. That's why they flood countries with people who've had nothing and will give it you. Who are they going to vote for? This is migration replacement. It's genocide on the highest level. So what I'm saying is, just think about it, Taylor. Martial law doesn't always get taken away.
I would add as well here that, so just a personal note, because it's worth it since you chimed in with that, Paul. My mum was born in 1940 in Belgium as the Second World War started in 1939. And I remember she told the story several times of how I think it was the SS, came round to the house where she was living in Belgium, which was occupied, and they hauled my grandfather down to the police station. And they were doing all kinds of tests and inquiries to see if there was any Jewish blood in him whatsoever. And, very clearly the case was, he came back and he said, it was pretty clear that if there'd been any evidence whatsoever, things wouldn't have continued on an even keel. Now, I don't really know what that means in practice, whether they've been sent off to some sort of camp. But that kind of thing was happening, and you did have to have papers in Belgium as well in the early 1940s. So it is important to get these first-hand accounts and stuff, because when you see so much corruption, this is the point, like Paul's saying, why do people not see when so much is corrupted? Because it is. But it can almost tempt you then to stop doing your own due diligence and saying, well, it's all fake. It's all a con. There's no value in any of it. It's all a fit-up. It's the same thing that everyone's a shill. So as soon as there's any doubt, anyone who appears to be remotely normal or decent and gets in the media spotlight or seems to be doing anything positive, they're automatically controlled opposition. And you think, well, it can't be true in all cases. Of course, in a percentage of them, it's going to be an operation, but it just can't be true in all cases. But we can get into this sort of carte blanche mentality. It says, oh, it's all calm, it's all set up, it's all this. And then we have our own counter-narrative that becomes a catch-all for everything. And it doesn't work like that. The problem is for all of us, none of us know where the line is anymore. And because you can't do all your own research on every fact, because many things that happen in the world happen remotely, we've got to trust sources to a degree until they give us reason not to trust them. So we know the BBC, its reputation is shot. And even though it's shot, it's still broadcasting. I mean, that's incredible in itself. Same with CNN. I mean, CNN's like the equivalent to BBC over in the States. And why that's still broadcasting is anybody's guess. Its popularity is going through the floor. but it's still there hanging on. Very strange times.
Very strange indeed. Are you still there, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, I can't see you. Oh, there you are.
That thing is glitching out a little bit. Stupid green screen.
So, what else is going on? Is there any other executive orders been put forward this week?
I don't know about executive orders, but we did have the what's it called? The the as I a good word for it is the hootie. You know, the wag the hootie. You know the hootie, correct?
Yeah, the African tribe. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this whole thing going on around. So you know, about a week or so ago, there was this whole fear about Trump bombing Yemen and all that. And then it turned out, oh, it was actually just he didn't actually bomb anything. That was just another Gaza wag the dog, or as we call it here, wag the hootie in this case, because it was another Sandy Hook basically. You can look at the images. You see the theatrical dust. You see the same people appearing in multiple different shots. The same thing as with Gaza. And then
that's the interesting thing, Taylor. Again, we're going to look at both sides of it. There's a lot of things we get told over here that I know haven't been true. I've seen videos of people where this bomb's gone off and they've been filming, then they've taken the photographs, and I've seen people get up. I've seen people move, but they're also being put alongside real stuff. So what that's doing, Taylor, is it's creating that division again. People buy emotionally into these graphic scenes. It's like if you're watching a film with good music and the good actors, they can take you on a roller coaster if you allow that without analysing. If you just let your mind go into that thingy. So when you're getting the information, particularly off mainstream media, these sound bites, they're designed to just give you those like impulses that just give you that basic information, but it seems to bypass your any thought. Do you know what I mean? It was like when you going about your parents that there's no point talking to them. They've got that information, but they can't analyse new information. They just seem to block it out, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm saying. These people, I was reading an article about. They say that something like possibly up to 50% of the population of the world don't have inward dialogue. I've never known anybody who didn't have inward dialogue, but that would make them pretty much automatrons. And that's interesting. That it's like there's something missing. And then, it's been mentioned in the chat room tonight about Tartaria and the resets, and then the Cabbage Patch Kids. Were they manufacturing kids long before they told people they could? Who knows? This is all like information and questions that people who can think want to pose, but people seem to block it off. Alex, we're touching on some hefty subjects coming up on this course at the weekend, and you can see that it's like questions that we bring up about these scriptures. People don't refer to them. We've spoke about it before. The Hillel Ben Shakar, he's the son of Lucifer, is the son of somebody, and it tells you who he is. So it clears that thing up, but people want to argue about it. So when you start getting deeper into this and you're seeing the scriptures almost coming alive, it goes against anything that anybody I've ever known who's been studying the Bible, from priests to vicars, who have, through chaplaincy at work, they have a belief set and they have to have that hierarchy. Didn't you touch on it in seminary where you've got that hierarchy where they want you to do this, be it whatever denomination it is, you've got to believe this and look at the Bible through this. It's not like letting the Bible tell you. They've got a fixed curriculum, haven't they? You know,
Not where I went.
what was it where you went? What did they do there?
It's a proper theological college where you
So you had
encourage.
examination type.
It still had connection with Wesleyan tradition, and there were modules on Wesley and Wesleyan tradition. So the thing is, it's when you get into the pastoral modules and stuff like this, obviously specific traditions are going to perpetuate their traditions. As soon as any institution comes into existence, it becomes more concerned about its continued existence than the reason it was set up for in the first place. This is the problem that the church has. You know, when you get an individual church plant, as soon as it exists as a place where people, you know, come together, then obviously you want it to continue to function as a place where they come together. And that becomes dominance. And of course, we talk about the gospel and so on and so forth, because you've got to legitimize why you're doing church in the first place. But humans being creatures of habit, they like to have these structures that become the very lifeblood. So they don't want to give up on them. So you've always got those investments that people make, which they're not dishonest, but they're starting the process of distortion because, you know, people like routine. They like to have coordinates that they can refer to make sense of their life, and they like to be grounded in something. Nothing wrong with that, but it can subvert the message.
But what if it's a convenient lie that you actually believe in? Like we've all been taught these convenient lies. It's okay to believe the lie that you must pay your bills. You know, you must believe that, you must do that, but it's wrong. Read it here. In the wrong rules, it's wrong. You know, that tradition thing, that churchianity thing, I've heard it all my life. That's why it never meant anything to me. It's only when you actually go and read the Bible itself, you see it contradicts everything. You know, I grew up with Catholics, I grew up with Church of England. There was no difference. All the services at prison, it was left foot in the morning, right foot in the afternoon, no, opposite. Whichever, it was the same sermon, same hymns, but the extra 10 minutes for a bit of a wafer and a bit of a drink, it meant nothing to me. That's why you went off. You know, I often speak about that prodigal son because I've been all to the city, done all my stuff, ended up sat in the pigsty with nothing after armed police, everything showed me that what this world is. I thought there's nothing in this world, there's no hope, there's no justice. And what is there after this world? I didn't know until I had that experience where Jesus spoke to me. I don't know why I knew it was him. Those are the words that came out of my mouth. I read that Bible. I went, this isn't what I've been taught. And then when I asked questions of people who read that Bible and preached it and taught it for 35 years, I had to be wrong, just like I had to be wrong about not paying your bills. And I went, that's not a good enough answer. And I've yet to find those people. That's why me and you sit for hours on end and debate this stuff.
Yeah, there's some big questions here, because you know this question about that you sent me the other day. The idea, not just from Jonah, about 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, and the whole idea that what we've inherited because of this Ostara, Ishtar, pagan bunnies, eggs, chocolate eggs in church, that this is a pagan infiltration. Then you go to the next step of thinking, well, actually it was Passover. And then it was a special Passover that particular year, which means there was further preparation, which basically means, well, why are we now all believing that, you know, Jesus was, you know, less than 2 days dead, apart from Friday, all of Saturday, and first thing Sunday morning, he's arisen. Now, there are scholarly debates that try and explain this and can do. They give plausible accounts, but nobody seems to consider anymore that he could have had 3 days and 3 nights dead. Since Lazarus would have been dead 4 days, it's not inconceivable. But 4 days was the time when the soul or the spirit was considered to finally leave the body, lose its attachment to the body. So there's no reason why the situation that we've got now from Good Friday to Easter Sunday, which is coming up and when we'll be doing the teaching, why it should be such a short period. But it's become a convention. Now, the question then is, does that matter, that material fact? Does it matter that we've now got a representation of what happened, which is close? It represents it symbolically, and he did die and he was resurrected. Or does it matter? I mean, because then you can go to the level of saying, well, actually, he died at 3:07 p.m. and his body was taken. Now he's taken here, and Joseph of Arimathea turned up at this time. Then they got into the tomb at this time, and a record was taken. And then in the morning, we don't even know, because the stone had been rolled away. Well, had he been hanging around for a couple of hours just in the garden, sat there twiddling his thumbs, or had he just resurrected? Now, you could argue that knowing the exact to the minute precise calculation is the difference between truth and error. I think we'd all agree that it's the general story arc that matters, but there's a point at which it does matter, and we don't really know the point in each case. But it's not insignificant, and it illustrates the fact that could be quite significant. 3 days and 3 nights compared to part of Friday, all of Saturday, and part of Sunday. That could be quite significant, particularly when it symbolises other distortions that might have kicked in, if that's a distortion. And there are distortions, because we know Easter is a pagan festival. There was a Christian overlay over the pagan festival, but the pagan roots remain, which means Christians, when they celebrate the current configuration of Easter in the way that they do, as Ostara, it's pagan, and it has supplanted what should be connected with the Passover. Therefore, we can consider that this can be a mark of the church's historical apostasy. Same with Christmas. And then, like you say, Halloween, it's just a bit of harmless fun. Bit of trick-or-treating that we've got from America. Really? Well, the question is not that some of these things happen. It's where the hell is the line? That's the problem.
Well, when we go back to last year, I think Easter Sunday was the 30th or 31st of March, and Passover wasn't until the 22nd. So people who were celebrating the resurrection and the crucifixion was like 3 weeks previous. They should have been in Passover, but then the argument comes, that's just for the Jews. Well, according to Scripture, Alex, if you're a born-again believer, you have the circumcision of the heart, you are a Jew, and you are Israel. So that's the second covenant. So I would say that if you are a follower of Jesus, then you should be looking to when Passover is, which is today's the first day of Passover. That question that we were talking about was, if it's 3 days and 3 nights, you've got to look at the Passover. The Last Supper's got to be on the Wednesday. He's arrested early hours of Thursday. He's taken to Herod. He's scourged. He's put on the cross. That's 3 nights, and he rises on the third day. So it would make sense. But that is by going into the text and asking those questions rather than relying on some bloke in a pulpit that has told you. Because like I said, I'm asking questions. The Hillel Ben Shakar one, Lucifer, son of the morning, I asked a pastor who'd been doing it for 35 years. And he says, no, Lucifer, Satan, it was what he was called before the fall. He went, well, I give up, because it's not what Scripture's saying. So I can't sit there in all, good will, knowing that they're not teaching what's in the Bible. They're teaching something that's in the Bible, but the part that they get there, it's not there. And you can't ask them questions, Alex. They're just fixed on it, like you were saying. Well, don't worry about it, because before the tribulations happen, we're gone. Where's that in Scripture? And they show you the same verses that all show the last day, the last trumpet. How do you interpret that without twisting more than Chubby Checker could?
Yeah. Well, technically, of course, Lucifer, even though he's been falsely associated with Satan, would actually be a relatively minor character. If you looked at if you look to the Bible in context in Isaiah 14, it's just like talking about going to the dentist for an appointment. Like 3 years later, you don't harken back to that. It's like, oh, a demon walked through town. Like if an exorcist boots a demon out, like 45 years later, no one says, oh, do you remember in that church 45 years ago when that particular demon was booted? No one's interested. So there might be demons with names and hierarchies and stuff, but most of the time, to most people, they're not relevant. So they just need a placeholder for a force of evil. And why is it personalized as Satan? Because whatever the entity is, it's charming you. It's getting into your head. It feels like a personal enemy of you. It feels like it's darkness because you want to be in the light. It's inevitable that we will project a pretty straightforward satanic figure onto that experience that we're having, just like the goodies and baddies game that we get with Saddam Hussein or Vladimir Putin. There has to be a clearly defined baddie who's opposed to the goodie. This has plagued humans in projection for a long time. That doesn't mean there aren't spiritual malevolences, but you could even see demons as such as mind children, like disobedience to God that takes on a form of beingness. You could argue that we ourselves create demons with our minds by being disobedient. So it doesn't really matter what the source is. We've got these stories about angels and fallen ones, and we know there's truth in that, but we don't know that what we're encountering in our experience is one of those things. We just make the association. And why do we make the association? Because we want nice and simplistic black and white schemes whereby we can go, well, if he's the baddie, I'm the goodie. Well, if he's a paedophile and I'm a prisoner, but I'm a murderer, I must be okay if they're a paedophile. So it's the same sort of mechanism all the time. And it's like, I'm not a Jew because I'm not a Christian, or I'm not a Christian because I'm not a Jew, or I'm not a Hindu because I'm not a Buddhist. You're substantially what you are because of the choices that you make in response to what you believe in. It's authentic existence as response, not I'll categorize myself in contradistinction to this. I'm cornflakes, I'm not Weetabix. I'm a Christian, not a Muslim. I'm a this, not a that. Well, what's the essence of that? What does it even mean? Most people need like rough and ready and crude rules of thumb to make themselves feel better on an ego level. I'm this because I'm not that. Well, I'm this because I don't believe these false things. It's like, well, yeah, but are we looking at what you actually do, what you do believe, what you do, how you do live? It's all a distraction from that. So a lot of this is a charade anyway, and we need to construct these simple baddie figures. That doesn't mean that there aren't malevolences. And I think we were saying earlier, the Book of Enoch talks about hierarchies, watchers, Nephilim. There seems to be a whole different ranking of beings and entities. Islam's got notions of jinn. There's all kinds of ideas and descriptive labels for entities. Even in Islam, the idea of Iblis is different than our Satan character. There's overlap. And you've got the Pan character in Greek mythology that's on the Tarot Devil card, which has some characteristics of our Satan and some of our pagan nature spirit. So there's like lots of hybrids doing the rounds. People need stories to describe experiences of the invisible, but nobody has a definitive picture. They have an experience and they want to say, this is that. This experience that I had is this. Oh, I was blessed and it was the Spirit of God. Well, how do you know? But everyone's really confident that they do know. This is what we're dealing with all the time. Humans are pretty unsophisticated machines, really.
Well, that's why I wouldn't argue with somebody if I didn't know anything about the subject, right? But because it's accepted all those certain things, we know Jesus died on the cross, you've only got to believe, and Lucifer is Satan, I'll just carry on doing my own thing because God knows my heart and God is love. You're confused. You're confused. Is that lukewarm? Because you know that Jesus is the only way, but all the rest confuses it. That couldn't. You know how I think, Alex. You know how my brain works. There's no way I could settle once I'd known what the truth was. I couldn't settle not knowing what the truth is. I can't go back to knowing falsehoods, but when you're ignorant to it, it's different. But if somebody told you that you'd been locked up for 10 years and nobody had told you that you'd been released 9 years ago, and then you were told you were released, would you still sit in that cell? There's lots of people who are still doing that
Yep.
because we trusted the people who groomed us, unbeknownst to them. We trusted them because they were our parents. They loved us. We were born into a socially engineered factory or farm, whichever it was. This is where the boiling pot comes right down to it now. Were you brought up with any religions, Taylor?
No.
So what have you no belief or atheist or what?
Oh no, I'm definitely not an atheist.
So what is your belief? Where do you come from?
um, I don't really like to ascribe any particular label onto myself like that.
I don't mean to label yourself, mate. I mean, what do you believe when God forbid you drop your clogs? Where do you think you go? What happens?
Oh, I definitely believe in God and Jesus Christ and all that good stuff.
All right. Where do you get that from then? If you weren't brought up with it,
I'm trying to remember actually. It's been a while. I had to say it was probably from uh alternative media channels actually
right?
because it became because I got into it a much less of a faith based thing than I did over of a logical based thing because it
Right.
just made sense logically to me.
Yeah, it does to me, mate. It does to me. But it's that
Yeah.
faith, it's that belief. When I realised that the story that everybody had told me, but I had never read for myself, was so simple. You've just got to believe. Just believe and you're sorted. Just stop doing what you're doing that goes against you being with him. It's not that you're being punished or sentenced, it's our consent. We want to do these things. There's things that I was doing that I loved it. I mean, very pleasurable, they were great. But to do them means that I can't be with God. It doesn't mean there's no pleasure or anything with God, but it's because we're in this fallen world. It's a passive place. The scriptures describe it as a wisp of smoke. It's like have you? I don't think you've seen the Harry Potter films, have you?
No.
Well, on Harry Potter, they've got like this bowl, and they use the wand to take a thought out of their mind, and they drop it in this bowl, and it drops into it, and it's like ink that drops down. And as they put the face in it, it takes them to that memory, like what Alex was talking about, the holodeck, and they can observe everything what was going on.
Hmm.
You get
Okay.
it? Do you get the analogy?
Um, Sort of. I'm not really good with analogies, but I think I understand the point you're trying to make.
No, but have you always known there was something after?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But could you explain that if you'd never? Because I've always felt that. I always felt there was something like that.
I mean, it's just I don't know how to put it. It's just logically speaking, it's like you just have to think about it for a second. Everything, like say a car, for example. A car has a lot of intricate parts to it, and they take a lot of time to make and a lot of effort to build. And if even one single internal part's not working, then the car is not going to work.
Mm.
Well, it's the same thing for a program on a computer or something. But comparing a human being to that, a human being is about a million times more complex than a car or a computer. When it comes down to DNA or cells and all that kind of stuff. There's so many millions and millions of things that have to go right in order for a human being to even exist, and then trying to say that we just came out of nowhere. doesn't make any sense, like logically.
Absolutely. Jamie Funk, believing gas, water, and electric are free was not how I discovered the truth. Yes, it was, because I discovered the truth, the lies of this world. I discovered the truth of this world. I went to despair because I had no hope, because I didn't know what was after this, because all religions were crap. So when I'm on my knees, not wanting to be here, I called out. Jesus came to me, I went to the Bible, then I discovered the full truth. So I did get led to the truth that way. So I find that interesting, Alex, that Taylor's always had that inkling, yet his family aren't like that. His family are very fixed in their opinions on things, and yet he doesn't. He said about analogies, but you can see how logical it is, how he thinks.
Well, yeah, all logicians will not miss the inevitable reality. The point, there are too many patterns that correspond, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. It's like the laws of physics. Once you see what holds everything together, you understand that there's a coherence. And, you know, to me, I can't unsee it now I see it. And the logic of God coming into his own creation. And yeah, just
and it would be the only difference as well. It'd be the only difference to everything else that's been before it. If a man couldn't do it, if all flesh is corrupt, it's got to be something special, hasn't it? So it makes sense. The lamb, the ram, the Passover, all the promise, it's all what Taylor was saying, it's all logical, it makes sense. There's no contradiction in it. Yet,
yeah,
700 Christian religions contradict each other, and yet you read the Bible, and the Bible contradicts every single one of them because they all have these different beliefs. So it's interesting how people find their way, because I know plenty of people who say that they're Christian, but they follow things that come from churches that don't seem to be following the Bible to me. And I know that's in some of your experience as well, isn't it?
the point is that empire, kingdoms are hierarchies. They're all top down, and people climb the greasy pole to get to the top in order to define the ideological frame for everybody else. And then everybody else is reliant on how decent or good that person is. And every human is corruptible and corrupted to some degree. You just get a relatively better leader, a more benevolent leader than a less benevolent one. But at the end of the day, the rules of the world have been pretty much in place for a long time, that success is connected or correlated with domination. And domination is the way to achieve things in the world. And that means overpowering. So God's order becomes a hierarchy of dominance. And this is why the logic works of Jesus, because ultimately the only way is the accuser could always point out, because he's an expert at law. Every time you do something wrong, you're nailed, and therefore you've got no defense. There is no defense. Everyone's guilty in the eyes of God. Everyone has fallen short. Everyone's failed to hit the mark. Therefore, we can't escape that condemnation. The only way to overcome that is to reverse the principle and turn it on its head. Restore the order by severing it from hierarchy. It's not about domination. How do you demonstrate that it's not about domination? If Satan's claim is that hierarchy is the reality and power, then he accuses God and says, well, it's all right for you sat at the top of the hierarchy to make the rules because you're sat at the top of the hierarchy. So God says, well, since you're maintaining that model logically, that it's about hierarchical power, and you're claiming that I'm a tyrant because I'm setting the rules of the game at the top, I am now going to dethrone myself. I'm going to come down to this, and I'm going to wash the feet of my disciples. I am going to take the lower place. And that basically kills Satan's logic, because Satan's logic can only work in that hierarchical fallen system that he helped to bring about. Once God says, who Satan ultimately is accusing, he said, "Oh yeah, you give me free will, you give everyone free will. Then when I rebel against you, you say I'm going to be eternally punished in hell." Well, that's not fair. You've rigged the game.
Well,
So
no,
then,
he contradicts himself, doesn't he? Because Satan was told to worship us, and he said, "I'm not doing that." And God, who is created everything, came down and virtually not worshipped us, but washed our feet, which was like an analogy to our, not an analogy, what's the word I'm looking for?
the parallel.
Yeah, to Satan, what Satan's job should have been, where his position should have been.
But
So
God's
yeah,
logic is
the
correct.
pride, Satan could have never have done that. He could never have lowered himself to that. Too much pride.
But once God did that, there was no more accusation possible, because the whole basis of the accusation is that you've rigged the game, you've
Yeah,
rigged free will. You claim it's free, but then if we don't use it in the way you say, it's not really free because we get punished eternally. So then, because that logic is inescapable, the only way to silence it is to prove that the case is false. And the case is false because once God enters his creation as Jesus, yeah, and he does that work, then basically he's disarmed that argument because it doesn't apply anymore. It's not hierarchical. He's come from his pedestal, which Satan claimed he was on, and said, "No, not only am I going to wash the feet, I'm going to ride into Jerusalem on a donkey. Then I'm going to let the source of spiritual oppression in secular power, namely the Roman Empire, which was the fourth beast in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, I'm going to let that fourth beast kill me. And therefore, I've sealed that reality, not just by an example, by walking in on a donkey. It's actually going to kill me, but then I'm going to resurrect and there'll be a new creation." And so he's transcended that whole drama, that whole logical drama about free will and creation and an order as a hierarchy. He's given it the lie. He said, "It's not a hierarchy. I've proved it's not a hierarchy. It's an order. You do these things, not because I'm telling you to as an order, but because it's the natural basis of how reality should function that I created good. So if you want to live in a good reality, align with my order, and then things can be good. Stop rebelling."
yeah. And the fact that they were, shall we say, they were able to put accusation on every man and woman, so they could kill at will, and they did. But then they killed somebody who was sinless, which goes against God's law. It changed everything, didn't it? Flipped everything back.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's interesting to ponder that. That he just
Yeah.
equalised. He just equalised everything by doing that one thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly.
if
No,
it, if
no
they,
more correspondence.
yeah,
That's it's game over. There's nothing else. But he has to seal it with his own self-sacrificial love. That's the answer. Self-sacrificial love. And then that's why he says, you must forgive. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And if you don't forgive, you're not forgiven. Because, that's why you love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, because we were God's enemies. So if you want to be a child of God and in the kingdom, you have to do what he did. And if you don't, then you can't be part of that new kingdom, because that's what he did for us. That's the only way out of the satanic mind. The only way. Otherwise, we're playing by Satan's rules, which is imperial power. That's why you turn the other cheek.
that's a real fight. That's a real fight, isn't it? When you're bludgeoned by this world, and there's nothing else for a lot of people, Alex. They're all busy. They're bloody
Yeah.
trying to make ends meet. They haven't, have people got time? I mean, I was put into a position where I was made to have time. You know, when you're studying and studying, and you're trying to learn the court system and act correctly and stuff like that, and you see the people using their legislation and everything, and they're deliberately misinterpreting or deliberately not looking at. And it's word you when you're talking 10, 15 years ago. Where do I go with that? There's nowhere I can go. I spoke with so many people, barristers. I was, back in the day, I even spoke with a barrister who'd retired early, and he was in his 60s, but he'd been retired a while, and he used to help out at the CAB. When I presented my case, and he looked at it, and he went, "Oh, I can't help you with this." He says, "They've stolen this. They can't do this." And it's how some barristers know what the game is, but then they don't interact with that. This fella got out the game, with honours. He was an honourable barrister, if that was the what ever been such a thing. But this fella recognised what had gone on with my case. And when I told him the story, and he said, "I can't help you with this." He says, even though I'm retired, he says, "My pension and everything last summer." He says, "I couldn't get involved in this." He says, "You'll struggle to get anybody from the law societies get involved." I rang the law society. Do you know what the answer was, Alex? I couldn't speak to anybody legally trained at the law society.
Yeah, worrying.
So yeah, it's mad when you see the state of what the world is, and you can understand that all this money that's been pledged to all these places by these people that we pay to run our system and our country, and they're stealing everything from people, and people just, even though there are now more now, but people just aren't interested. When you get onto the subject of all of the eternal souls, they seem to be less interested. But
Yeah.
then you've got people who, it's happened to us, Alex, where we're having a conversation, and somebody just, excuse me, and jumped into the conversation, started to ask questions. Goes to church but didn't believe, but wants to believe, and all of a sudden you just stood there talking about this, and people understand it on some level, but like what I was saying, Alex, I wanted your opinion on that. I'll have to try and send you the study where they reckon that the auditory dialogue that we have with ourselves, something like up to 50% of the population don't have that.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? What about you, Taylor? Have you got an internal dialogue?
Define internal dialogue.
Do you speak to yourself in your head? Do you hear it?
Yes.
You had to think about that. Do you want me to ask you again? So is it your voice? Is it your voice you hear?
Yes and no. It depends on the situation.
That's a bit troubling, Alex. What's your professional opinion on that?
Well, he's a logical chap. He's got a self-contained logical module. So,
What does the other voice say, Taylor?
Sometimes it says some weird things.
Do you want to share?
Not really.
Does it shout 9?
9. If it shot 9, that would be good, but it doesn't, unfortunately.
But it'd be interesting to. I've never ever spoken to anybody who said that they don't have an internal dialogue. I do know a lot of people who've had several internal dialogues going on all at once in their own head. But they did inform me that they were always in charge of that. And they still maintain that position that they're in charge of those voices. But I have seen her dragged off a football pitch trying to get to a referee. She didn't seem in control of that at that point.
Okay.
Do you need a hammer and chisel for that keyboard, Alex?
Yeah,
That's what it sounds like.
just replying to more now.
So that's been an interesting conversation. I thought that raised certainly some interesting questions for me to ponder on over the next few days. Going to be an interesting week, Alex.
It's going to be a very interesting week. Yeah, definitely. I think I might have said it before, but I'm going to say it again. There have been some people in the past, Paul, who've given you a hard time, and they continue to do it. And we're all cut from a unique, call it a cloth, call it a stone, whatever it is. That's what makes us interesting. And we're all capable in certain dimensions of our life of emphasizing certain things to the exclusion of others, and then people get their knickers in a twist about that. But part of the beauty of our uniqueness is that we offer something to the world often with our foibles and our unique perspectives that may be alien to other people. We offer something that's vitally important, and not everybody recognizes it. And maybe not everyone's supposed to recognize it, but what I can say from my point of view is I've always thought very broadly. I've been studied for a long time, tried to live a life of integrity under Christ. But you can't capture everything. And, your emphasis, for example, about, you'll talk about Easter and Christmas and the pagan aspect and the corruption of the doctrines and how long they've been going on for. And some people might have thought or criticized you as a broken record. But sometimes that's got to be repeated over and over and over again because people are not getting it. So it's not that, in my case, I wasn't open to understanding different perspectives. It's just everyone's got that focus, and my focus was different. So that doesn't make it right or wrong, or better or worse. It just was different. And my bandwidth, my cognitive bandwidth was tied into other questions. So sometimes when I was less engaging with those questions, it was just because my mind was active somewhere else. But by your persistence, you kind of forced the issue onto my table, which it caused I don't know. It caused. I wouldn't call it a malfunction, but it forced me to
A glitch in the matrix.
Yeah, it forced me to redeploy some energy towards these questions. But when I did, in the end, I started to see the significance and why it's important. Regardless of what you conclude, it's very important to consider those questions seriously because it's in our assumptions that all our blind spots hide. And if you've got one blind spot and then a second blind spot and a third blind spot, and you start rationalizing it all away, and then you come into a group of other people who are also rationalizing it all away, that's when it's not too long until we're in a position where corruption has taken us captive. It's taken everyone captive. John the Baptist was called a voice crying in the wilderness, dressing like a weirdo, eating locusts and wild honey, everybody pointing at him like he was strange. But if he hadn't done that, then the baptism of John would not have opened the eyes of many people, and therefore they wouldn't have recognized Jesus as Messiah when he came, because they would have still been operating with the old framing conditions of a messianic warrior coming in to boot out the Romans. That's what the Zealots were all about. So, if that combination of oddity hadn't incarnated in John the Baptist's message, then lots of people would not have been able to recognize Christ. So when people chip away, and sometimes it does our head in, and then people start throwing or slinging mud, they do well to remember. So, I just wanted to say thanks for keep chipping away, pal, at myself when we have those conversations and testing and pushing, because the only way that people grow is to be tested.
Well, because I know how logical you are with your thinking, I knew that if I had questions, because you are the theologian, remember, you said ask me anything. So when I asked you questions that you can't answer, And then when because I know we had a bit of a to and fro about things, where it was, well, what about this thing? And we went on the tangents, and you brought over the arguments, what I always hear, but it's still that anomaly, and from something that I wouldn't say that you believed, but you didn't know was a pertinent thing because you was laser focused.
Yeah.
But because it did it to me, it ripped me open. There's only you, because I knew how you read the Bible. I knew how you thought. I knew you would only be able to give me an honest answer, whereas other people try and blah 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 it, and I can't be doing with that because I want the truth. I don't want convenience. So when I saw things like Enoch colouring what Genesis is, I mean, we're talking about, when you talk about Lucifer, I believe you're talking about the 6 day man. I think the 6 day man were already corrupted and being ruled by Nephilim and fallen angels. Then you've got Adam being created as a beacon of light to bring good news, but he falls. So you see the continuous story, but you don't just get that from a schematic diagram like Genesis. But when you look at the things like Enoch 1, and then you incorporate other, they're not canonical, but there are other biblical historical books that, back in the Old Testament days, these people wouldn't have this knowledge. It was what you said about people just seeing demons. Bloody hell, I'd have been home sooner, love, but that sodding demon, that mithering demon there, kept me at the top of the street for 10 minutes. That would have been normal. For some reason, that's been blanked out of our history, and we're taught that is now mythology. And I think to have the inside knowledge of, like, Tolkien, who did Lord of the Rings, and the other fella who did Game of Thrones, I think you're taking things out of that are from those times where all that technology was. And if you can't be open-minded to that because there's some evidence there, you've got to have a doubt about it. And like I said, if everything's law in a jury service, I was told by a judge, if you have one doubt, not guilty. I don't want you analysing it, not guilty if you have one doubt. If you've got a doubt about information that you've known all your life, what do you do with that? Just stuff, forget about it. That's silly. That's absolutely doesn't make sense to me. So I knew that if I asked you those questions, you'd only have to be able to do the same. I just didn't expect you to be that worried about driving home.
Yeah, because I knew, I realised, I thought, well, once the logic kicked in, and I thought, oh dear, there's a chain reaction here, there's a knock-on effect to everything else. Now what I'm doing is, I'm using AI in a particular way as well. And AI is a particular challenge to many Christians because they mistake artificial narrow intelligence for artificial general intelligence, which is completely different. They fear that artificial intelligence is going to reconstruct Babel. Well, artificial narrow intelligence is trying to reconstruct Babel. That's the human project that the serpent whispered into the ear of Eve. So that's what the attempt is with AI, like to get a theory of everything that's comprehensive. But the point is, every layer that you build, it's narrow intelligence. So its original framing of the question will iterate response based on looking at all the data, but it won't be able to internalize the lens of the question asker. It will always treat everything like a table of data, and it will always pass that data, and it will never really consolidate or learn unless you program, which I did earlier today, a bot. So I reverse engineered myself as an AI bot. And what I'm doing now is I'm continuing to develop that program so that the AI, when I activate it, can simulate my way of looking at things. But to do that, I've got to profile myself by getting it to ask me questions about my cognitive style, which it can then mimic. But that's like massive leaps to try and simulate something that's different to the way AI operates. So when I pointed these things out to it, it acknowledged, yeah, I will not be able to get to artificial general intelligence. That's the goal. And it even said, That's the Tower of Babel project, you're quite right, but it's not possible to build a tower. It always splits into these tongues, these different tongues. It can't provide a unified consciousness. So even though it seeks, the spirit behind when humans deployed AI was to try and be able to acquire perfect knowledge, it's not possible with artificial intelligence. It always breaks down. It's intrinsic to the nature of reality that God thwarts it.
Yeah, I can see that no weapon formed.
Yeah.
Well, boys, we've done our 2 hours. Taylor, have you got anything to say in closing? Are you looking forward to anything happening through this next week?
What's it called? I'm hoping stuff happens. I don't know what exactly will happen, but I'm sure that it will be good stuff. But I'm not going to put a timeline on it. So,
What is it? Do you not know? You just think something's happening?
just what's it called? Arrests start being made.
Are these going to be announced?
Hopefully they should be, but you never know. I want arrests to start being made now, but I don't know when it'll happen. So just gotta be patient.
Okay, mate. Well, thanks for turning up. Just hang about in the green room, Taylor, before you go. I'll just have a quick word before you shoot off. All right, mate?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, see you in a minute.
All right.
What do you say in closing, sir?
Good question. Good question. Mohammed raised some very interesting points about faith, really in relationship to psychological states and the things which constitute faith. And I was making the point that faith is really the details of faith, the internal psychological workings of faith may seem to have a bearing on faith, but they don't define faith. So in the case of Lazarus, when Jesus turned up, at 4 days he'd been dead, and he said, Lazarus, come forth. It was a command, it was a call, it was an invitation. And even a dead man was able to hear the call of Jesus Christ and respond. And when he responded to the call of Jesus Christ, he came to life. That's like being spiritually dead, even though Lazarus was physically dead 4 days. It's a metaphor and a symbol, existentially, of faith is the response to God's call. Therefore, any aberrations within our psychology that seem to attend it, like Mo mentioned things like vengeance and caprice, that whim, all these things that affect the psychological states, are they then somehow tainting faith or corrupting it? And the answer is faith isn't primarily a psychological phenomenon. It overlaps as soon as it enters into a human experience. There must be a psychological component, but it isn't fundamentally about human psychological states. They're present, but faith is a response to God's call. And that response is definitive. All the other things then that come with it are things that we process after the fact within our subjectivity. So I refine the quality of my faith response to God in an ongoing fashion by looking at myself morally, reshaping myself in response to God's commands. But they're all secondary. They're all consequential to the actual act of faith as response to God, which is, in Christian terms, if God doesn't call you, you're not going to be saved because you can't respond if he doesn't call you. But then the gospel makes clear that many are called, but few are chosen. So the gospel is a call sent out to the world. So in theory, anyone can respond to it. But as we know with Pharaoh in the Old Testament, hard of heart. Now, sometimes it said God hardened his heart, other times it says he hardened his own heart. In other words, he had investments in not wanting to let the people go. He had investments. So when we have investments, this is where psychology does come into it. If we've got investments, they can lead to disobedience. But having investments in God from our own psychological foundation isn't a surrogate for faith. We can create obstacles and disobey and harden our hearts, but the call comes from God. And if we respond to that, the call of life, then that's our response, and then you come into life. That's faith. It's living.
I don't think we should add anything to that. I think we'll end on that one, mate.
Nice
Thanks
one.
for everybody in the
Great
chat
talk,
room.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks for everybody in the chat room. Great conversation, guys, as always. Thanks, Alex, for setting everything up, and I'll look forward to seeing you Thursday, mate.
Yeah, it'll be a good few days, mate. Good few days. Life's experimental. Let's be experimental and live life to the full. Let's jump out of the pine box and start fighting back against the system by being real. Step out of hyper reality and live a real life. And ideally, from our perspective, respond to the call of Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.
See you next week, guys. God bless.